Hello everybody, we are Team Facebook, and we think that social media rocks. We think that social media is the most important media today, and we think it's going to be the most important media into the future. And when we started thinking about what we wanted to investigate, we had heard that recently, circa 2007, Brandenburg discovered that employers are starting to data mine Facebook and use that data during the hiring process. And so we thought that college students on Facebook would actually regulate their self-disclosures online in response to these employers, and we hypothesized that they would do so. And I'm going to pass it now to Kurt, who's going to talk about the lit review and the theories that we use.
Great. As Brinkley said, impression management theory is the theoretical basis of our research. We draw about 3 key points from the literature. Point 1 being that people do control their self-disclosures. Goffman 56 says that people put on a performance. They present the image that they want other people to see while simultaneously concealing negative acts. Schlenker 80 extends this by saying that we do this all the time, unconsciously or consciously, in all social situations. So that's point 1. Point 2 is that there are specific tactics that people use to control these impressions. Ellis et al. 2002 did a study where they found impression management tactics in job interviews. And they uncovered a series of assertive and defensive tactics. Assertive tactics being things like self-enhancement or self-promotion versus defensive tactics being like excuses, justifications of negative behavior, etc. But the biggest point is, what does this have to do with Facebook? Why is Facebook so important? Well, the reason Facebook is so important is because of the privacy controls that Facebook offers. Point 3 is brought up by Akisti and Gross 2006. They uncovered that not only does Facebook provide a myriad of privacy controls, but that the majority of people actually know how to use them. So people are really in control of their self-disclosure. That brings up a lot of questions. If they can control the privacy of their information, do they disclose more, disclose less? What do they do if they know people are going to be reading their profile? And so those are some of the questions that we try to answer, and briefly we'll talk about our sample.
What we did is we used an online survey method. We used SurveyMonkey, and we emailed a link to 2,337 students at UGA. We did get that list from a professor here at UGA. Some of you might know her. She's in the room. It's Dr. Sweetser. And we got a response rate of 15%. 328 students responded. Some of the things that we discovered is 76% overwhelmingly of the respondents, 76% were the ladies. We got 81% were Caucasian, and also we got an even distribution among the classes, and so like freshmen, sophomore, junior, senior, that was very evenly distributed. We're really confident with our 15% response rate. We would love to get a 17% response rate, but we're confident that it's going to add validity to our sample. Now I'll talk more about the instrument that we used in the survey, and also some about the data analysis. It's our SPSS daddy, Mr. Nick Browning.
Thanks. Lovely intro. All right, well, when we're looking at all this data, we had to ask ourselves what questions that we needed to address in the instrument. So mostly we wanted to know how do people feel about the privacy on Facebook and the security of their information? How did those measures relate to employment? And we also asked a question about personal and social identities. We felt that if people define themselves more socially, they would disclose more. One of the major studies we used was Williams 2008. She did a master's thesis at Texas Tech about interpersonal self-disclosure. Hers loaded on 6 factors, but they were very poor, didn't explain much variance, and the alphas were really low. But we felt like those items matched what we wanted to study really well, so we went with them. We made a few small changes to make it more employment concerned, and we added a few questions that went along with it as well. And as we expected, when we did a 5-point Likert scale item, we got better alphas than she did. It loaded on 6 factors. The first one measured how cautious people were about the information they posted online, and that had an alpha of 0.81. The second one measured how dependent people were on Facebook for interpersonal communication, had an alpha of 0.77. The third one measured how much people trusted the privacy settings on Facebook, that had an alpha of 0.78. Our fourth one measured whether people would disclose personal information on Facebook, that had an alpha of 0.62. Our fifth one measured employment concerns, whether or not they thought their Facebook would affect their ability to get a job, had an alpha of 0.6. And our last one was how anonymous people felt on Facebook while communicating, then an alpha of 0.64. As Kurt mentioned with the Ellis study about impression management tactics, we took that and developed 7 items related to job interview impression management, measured that on a 5-point Likert scale, and it loaded on 3 factors. One was enhancement, which basically means talking yourself up, your reputation, at alpha of 0.76. Defensive tactics, like Kurt mentioned, excuses, justifications, things like that, alpha of 0.59. And self-promotion, which is self-explanatory, at an alpha of 0.57. Now, even though these last two alphas sound really low, there's only 2 factors in each one, so it's actually a pretty decent alpha. Lastly, we used Cheek, Smith, and Trop 2002 study. They did an aspect of identity questionnaire. It's in its 4th version right now, measuring personal and social aspects of identity on a summated index. Their alphas for the personal identity was 0.73, and for the social, 0.84. When we ran it, we used the 17 items just as they did. We got an identity for personal of 0.87 and social for 0.80. So our alphas were better or right at where theirs were. Also, we wanted to determine site use frequency, so we asked how many friends people had, how often they used Facebook in a day, or how many hours, or how many days a week, how many hours a day, how long they had an account, and how many features and what types of features they used. And we figured the higher you scored on those scales, the heavier user you were. And so to take all this data and make some sense out of it, Ash is going to talk to you about our results.
Okay, within our study we had 4 main research questions. The first being, will seniors regulate self-disclosure in their profiles more than younger students because of immediate employment concerns? We then asked, will site use frequency reflect the level of regulated self-disclosure on Facebook? The third research question asked, to what degree will employment concerns reflect regulated self-disclosure on Facebook? And the fourth asked, do participants scoring higher on scales of social identity self-regulate more than those scoring high on scales of personal identity? The general statistics we found were that 96% of our respondents were on Facebook, which wasn't a surprise based on who we were asking. And impressively, 88.9% of these students had heard of employers looking at Facebook, which is kind of the premise of our whole study. We wanted to know if people knew. We found that 61% of these students were actually, they made their profiles only available to friends, so it's not like you go online and find these people and look at their information. Unfortunately, based on the RQs we were concerned with, we found no significance at all, so we had to apply a null hypothesis to each of the research questions. With this null hypothesis, we were then able to just kind of play with the data and see what was actually there for possible future research. And some of the things that we did find that were significant were that females tend to promote themselves more than males on Facebook, and that there's a positive correlation between how often you use Facebook and the number of features you use, and the longer you've been on Facebook, the more friends you have, which seems obvious, but now we have the data to prove it. We also found that the more features you use, the more aware you were of privacy concerns and privacy availability on Facebook, which confirmed the Equisty and Growth study from 2006. And we also found that the more features you use, the more concerned you were with employers looking at it. So basically, these people put a lot of stuff out there, but they know how to control it because they know someone could be looking over their shoulder. Now Kurt's going to discuss some of the limitations and possible future research areas.
So really the biggest limitation with our study is related to our sample in that our conclusions are not really generalizable for the entire Facebook user population. We employed a convenience sample. The number of respondents we had, about 328, is really tiny in comparison to the hundreds of millions of people that use Facebook. And as Brinkley mentioned earlier, we had a disproportionate amount of women in our sample. But despite all these things, we feel like our results are very significant indeed. As far as future research is concerned, we feel one area of particular interest would be looking at self-disclosure, the relationship between self-disclosure and the number of Facebook friends that you have. I mean, that could be really interesting. Do people who put out more information on Facebook, on their profiles, whatever, do they have more friends? And if so, is that significant? We feel like that'd be a great area for other researchers to look at. In general, though, we feel like our study has just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that can be looked at, looking at the relationship between impression management and Facebook usage. And we feel like this will just become more and more important as the years go by, as social media becomes more and more accepted by the global population. But one more thing we wanted to say is that we feel like, despite the fact that employers are using Facebook to check up on people, we feel like this tactic is going to be less effective over time, mainly because, as we've kind of proven with our results, people know how to manage their information disclosure on Facebook through privacy controls, etc. And so they'll become more savvy about what they want to post and who they want to see it. So employers who want to data mine these Facebook profiles looking for information are going to become less successful. So thank you very much for your time.